And it was more of an activism path, like really believing that music can change the world, music. And
I was gonna say, man, so many songwriters want to change the world, and here you are actually doing it, and man, just an inspiration. But well, how did that take shape? Like you gloss over like I just ended up with the United Nations, but I know it's more than that, right? Like how did you end up in
oh,
that position?
um, well, obviously, like it's a long story,
Right.
but I was in college, I was graduating, and a friend of mine who was just a couple years younger than me, so she was like a junior, right? She had moved into the house where I was living, and she and I were talking. She was a very inspiring person, an activist. Her name's Julia Walsh. And she was saying to me, like, I can't study what I want to study at this school. I'm going to transition to a different college because they don't have a program that I want. Like, I want to do foreign relations and like peace studies and things like that. So I said, why don't you just tell them that you want to make your own major? Because you can do that. She's like, you could do that? It's like, yeah, you could do that. Just go tell the guy, go to the guidance counselor, whatever that office is, and tell them you want to design your own major. And then you get to choose the classes that you take and build your own major.
Huh.
So she did it and she stayed. She stayed in that school and we became really, close friends. And there was this one day where we were taking a walk. The place where we lived was at the end of a dead end road, and there was all these forest, woods and wetlands. Like I used to walk my dog there all the time. I knew all the trails like the back of my hand. I spent, ton of time hiking in those woods. And she and I were walking, and she said to me, there's a development company that has put in a petition to basically like tear down these woods and make this big senior housing facility. But the problem is that it's going to be so expensive that the people who live here won't even be able to afford it. So it's going to be like all these people coming up from the city, and it's just going to be terrible because they're going to destroy the woods. And I, again, had spent so much time in those woods. Like I knew it was a very sacred, special place. And I also knew there was like a lot of Native American history there in those woods. And so I said, so what can be done about it? She's like, well, there's a new election coming up for local government and 3 seats are opening up. And I was thinking that if I was going to run for like the village board, if I had two other people to run with me, we could take over the board and then stop the development from happening.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was like totally politically strategizing this whole thing. And I happened to know another person who I'd gone to school with who was, he was like trying to make a career in politics, but he was a student activist. He was a Green Party guy. So I introduced them. And basically, long story short, we took over the local government within the next 5 weeks. Won by a landslide, made international news twice in 1 year. Um, it was an epic time, and it taught me a lot about politics. Um, that the people can make a difference through voting at the local level, um, but also that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's another part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, Julia went on to work at the UN and to become part of the Young General Assembly at the UN. And she asked me to help her orchestrate a concert on Holocaust Memorial Day in the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, right down there at UN headquarters. And so we put on this whole show. I had already been producing benefit concerts at the college for a couple of years. I'd been putting bands together to raise money for different causes. So it was very natural for me to just fall into that, helping her put on this concert at the UN. And that opened all these doors. And people just kept inviting me to come and sing and come and do this and come and do that. And then I eventually got an opportunity to represent um, an international peace organization and do more international work
Which is,
as
I
a
mean, just looking at this story, it all started by saving the woods, right?
yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, I love that. I love that. Just we're gonna save the woods. We're gonna save the woods. And
Yeah.
like if you go to Aliza's webpage, alizahava.com, and go to the about section, there's just one small paragraph on this. There's so much to unpack about this that I wanted to talk about it because there's only one small paragraph here. But it says that you were living part time in the Middle East and you were representing United Nations peace building initiatives. You worked with Israeli and Palestinian musicians promoting peace, and this started by saving the woods. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
love that. I love that.
that that piece, there was a thread that happened before the woods that led to it, but it was all connected, you know. It's all connected.
I
Yeah.
love that though. So what was that like? Just like being kind of almost like a mediator between Palestinians and Israeli musicians.
I would say that it was less of mediation and it was more about building friendships
Yeah.
and trust. Um, there were a lot of different projects that I was affiliated with. My official title at the time was Middle East Regional Coordinator for the Culture of Peace Initiative at the UN. Um, and again, like my role was really just connecting with people on a human level
Hmm.
and a spiritual level. So I worked a lot with Muslims and Christians, and I'm Jewish. So, like, having conversations around the commonality between the religions was really important because religion tends to cause a lot of division and destruction when people are like extreme about it.
Yep. Absolutely.
But when you approach it from a humanistic level of like God is love, right? And if we're all children of God, then we're here to like get along. And
Hmm.
if you look at the history of like Islam and Judaism, like there were many Muslims and Jews living together harmoniously for thousands of years. So it's not like what we're experiencing now was always the case. Um, but building those bridges, right? So it's less about mediation in my case. There are people who do mediation work, and that's very important, crucial work.
Yeah.
Um, but as an artist, and also completely untrained, like I didn't go to school for this, right? I didn't go to school for concert production. I didn't go to school for diplomacy or dialogue or anything like that. It was just about building bridges through the arts, creating common ground, creating experiences where people could feel safe to be themselves and to build trust. And those are more grassroots kinds of projects, like person to person, not so formal or official or, funded per se,
What do you think? What do you think's the biggest thing you learned from this period?
from that period of my life. I would say, it's a mixed bag, right? Because I could look at what's happening now and I could say, wow, what a waste. What a waste of time. I
Hmm.
really didn't do much at all, did I? But then I know that's not true because I know that I was part of something that was planting seeds for peace, people who know, like in that region, there are people who like never met a Jew.
Yeah.
So they have this idea that Jewish people are these like, I'm not going to even say it because it's like it's too much,
Hmm.
the dark thinking that has permeated this dynamic that's happening over there. And at the same time, there are people who are extreme on the Jewish side
Of
who
course.
also have extreme views. And so
And preconceived notions that have just
I
been, just completely. I mean, it's generational. It's passed down from mom to son or dad to son. It's just it's passed down, and that's usually how hate is, right? Like hate is learned.
Exactly.
It's not something we're born with, you know?
Exactly, exactly. So a lot of my work was in education,
Yeah.
education and dialogue and music. And actually, when I was sharing before that I never thought that I was going to be like a professional musician, I never thought that would be like a realistic path for me. I wanted to be a teacher. That was my first, thing. I'm going to be a teacher. And then I discovered music therapy, and I was like, wait a second, that's what I want to do. I want to do music therapy because that's who I am. Like I healed myself in music. That's so I saw my peace building work as a form of music therapy also because it's so transformative. When people sing together. And in that regard, I put on a concert called Harmony in the Holy Land, and brought together Muslim, Christian, and Jewish musicians singing together in a prayer for peace that was live streamed to like 100,000 people.
Wow.
And we had a full house. We brought Palestinian kids in from the West Bank who had never met a Jewish person. And it was powerful because they were dancing together. Like there were people dancing together, like breaking those, I would call it like a spell, like a belief system of like,
Yeah.
we can't get along, or because ultimately we're cousins. I mean, that's the fact,
Yep.
right?
But it's hard to break those cultural norms, those societal expectations from a certain culture that you've grown up in. It's once you're outside of that box, so to speak, it's so hard to try to educate somebody into believing anything different than what they've been taught. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. And that is the hardest thing. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing moving forward, like in that region. I haven't lived there in more than 10 years, but like after this war, the healing that needs to
Yeah.
happen.
I think
The
music could be a very, very crucial tool in establishing peace because music is very neutral. It has always been neutral. Like religion is like almost like the opposite of that, right? It creates all of this bias and yours or mine is better than yours, etc. Music's kind of the opposite of that. Like everybody can come together on good music, even if you don't understand the language that it's being delivered in. Like I love music of all languages because you can feel it. It's about feeling instead of believing. You know?
I feel you.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. So I
completely.
love I love the fact that I am talking to somebody who has, in essence, used that toolbox, that music in the toolbox, to try to bring about peace and had success with it. I love that. It's so cool to have you here.